there is that one moment where you can quit or you can decide to, continue on. And they came in and they reminded me, do you think you'd be struggling right now if nobody knew about you? And I said, no. And they said, so consider yourself in a position of not obscurity, but resistance. And they are resisting you like crazy. And just wait. You'll hit acceptance and you'll get some wind in your sails. But for now, they wouldn't be fighting you if you weren't a threat. And that changed the way I looked at everything.
Wow. That's a great story. I love hearing stories like that. That's why I love doing the show, because it's not only I love hearing it. I know that listeners right now love hearing that just to that honesty and transparency. And I'm glad that you had the advisors you did to show you how to move through obscurity and resistance.
In today's ultra-competitive business world, being a successful entrepreneur or business owner can be very challenging. Fortunately, contemporary times have blessed us with resources for tackling those challenges and getting us to success more quickly than we could have imagined. Welcome to The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan, a podcast that explores how the world's most powerful entrepreneurs grow incredible companies. This podcast looks at the 5 keys to unlocking success as an entrepreneur. A successful educator turned entrepreneur, Jason's mission is to use his gifts of teaching and leadership to help others get the results they want out of life. Join Jason every week and learn the keys to grow a truly successful business.
Well, welcome back to the show. I'm the real Jason Duncan. Thank you for tuning in for another amazing episode of The Root of All Success. My guest today is just going to be phenomenal. I don't unfortunately get a ton of female entrepreneurs on the show for one reason or the other, but today I've got an amazing, successful female entrepreneur that you're absolutely going to love, and I'm going to introduce her appropriately here in just a minute. But I got a couple of housekeeping things I want to do. Number one, if you haven't yet subscribed to the show, please go do that on whatever, if you Spotify, Stitcher, Apple iTunes, wherever you listen to it, please hit the subscription button. And also we're on YouTube. You can go to youtube.com/TheRealJasonDuncan and you subscribe to the show there, and you can watch this. And I'm actually recording this show from my home studio here in Gallatin, Tennessee, just north of Nashville. And what's interesting about today's recording, even though the show won't air until January 22, today is the 1-year anniversary of the very first recording that I ever did for The Root of All Success. It's hard to believe that I've been doing this now for a year. And I want to say thank you so much to you, the loyal listener, for being here, for subscribing, for leaving me a 5-star review on the review page on Apple iTunes. Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you for tuning in. And if you've got ideas for content or guests, go to therootofallsuccess.com and please drop me a line. Let me know what you would like to see or hear on the show. And I'll do my best to reach out to that type of guest or that person, or do that type of content and to give you what you need as an entrepreneur. Because my goal with the show is to let you see behind the curtains a little bit, like we're going to get into today's show with our guests about how they did what they did. And you're going to see and hear in our show today, she's going to share things that she has not shared publicly before about her story to success. And there's going to be a couple of pauses in her conversation because she's thinking, should I share this? And so you're getting to look behind the scenes and to see how success really manifests itself for entrepreneurs. And you can do the same thing. So the 5 keys of success, just like every show, we're going to be talking about that today. So let me go ahead and get into the introduction for today's show. Today's guest actually has such an amazing background that I'm going to do more reading in an intro than I normally do, but because I don't want to leave anything out. Carol Carpenter is my guest today, and she is the first American-born Chinese of her family, and she played the role of big sister to a large extended family. And she's got a pretty interesting story about coming to the United States, and she's going to tell a little bit about that or her family coming to the U.S. She was born in L.A., but her family came from China to the United States before she was born. She's going to tell a little bit about that story today. And in her teenage years, being the eldest, her focus shifted to her mom who had terminal cancer. And unfortunately, she passed away. But while her mom was dealing with cancer, Carol had this sense of wanting to go into the medical field. And so she started studying medicine. She took 4 years of Latin to please her mom. And she really had this desire to help her mom. But her mom, unfortunately, passed away at the age of 47 when our guest was only 20 years old. And that really changed her focus and what she wanted to accomplish. She felt like the medical field didn't really have the answers that she wanted for her mom and for other countless people that she wanted to help through the medical field. And that began a search for the next thing. So she went to work for a tech firm where she ultimately met her husband, got married, had a couple of boys. And by the time they were teenagers, her boys were teenagers, her marriage began to deteriorate, and she found herself feeling this sense of emptiness, and she wanted to figure out what her purpose was. She began re-exploring her goals and her passions that led her to do modeling and to do stunt work as a stunt woman and do acting. And ultimately, she realized that she had always wanted to learn how to ride a motorcycle. So she went out and took an MSF course, which is Motorcycle Safety Foundation class, and she developed an insatiable desire to excel in this newfound passion of hers in motorcycling. And I can, as we're going to talk about on the show today, I can absolutely sympathize with that because I too am a motorcycle rider. I love riding motorcycles. And if I could figure out how to make that the thing that I do 100% of the time, like she's done, I would do that too. But after she took that class, she noticed that she was one of the only few female instructors and riders who raced in the sport. And because the sport was giving her a sense of purpose, she wanted to go back and do track days and bring women into the sport that was mostly dominated by men. And so in 2011, as a successful entrepreneur, model, actress, and race enthusiast and motorcycle enthusiast, she found herself at a crossroads. And so she decided to actually start a company called Moto Vixens. And she officially started the company in 2012. And she was faced with a lot of challenges she's going to share today in a male-dominated market where women weren't necessarily welcomed into the market, into the industry in motorcycling. So in 13 and 14, she started doing her own track days. And she's going to talk about her story about how she was fired from doing track days before she started doing her own. And she even ended up partnering with Jason Pridmore in 2015 of JP43 Training. Jason's a world-renowned racer. He's won multiple championships, respected in the industry as the riding coach. And she met him through a friend of her boyfriend's after she got divorced. And today, our guest, Carol Carpenter, has become an influential figure in the motorcycle industry. She focuses a lot of her time on giving back. And when she talks about her definition of success, you're going to see exactly what that means to her. And through sponsorships, she continues to help riders, racers, and others find their passion and fulfill their dreams. So please welcome Carol Carpenter to the show. Carol, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jason.
Well, you and I were introduced through some mutual acquaintances and colleagues in the business world, and your reputation preceded you because I happen to be, as you know, a pretty big motorcycle rider and fan myself, although I don't do track days and I don't ride sport bikes, I ride touring bikes. But I had heard about you all for the last 2 or 3 years, and everybody kept saying, you got to talk to this Carol Carpenter lady. She's pretty awesome. She's got so many cool things in her backstory. So today I'm honored to have you on the show. So thank you for dialing in and being here on Zoom. So you're in Washington State, right?
Correct. I am. Olympia, Washington.
Olympia. So I don't know my Washington geography. So where is that?
Southern, mid-southern Washington.
All right. Well, that's one of the states I've not been to. I've been to some on the West Coast, but not been to the state of Washington. Here, it's absolutely beautiful there. So thank you for
green.
Very rainy.
Very rainy, very green.
Well, you know what? I heard this. I think this is true. I'm not sure it's true. I'm in Nashville. I heard that we have more annual rainfall than you guys do because yours is like a mist all the time, where ours just dumps buckets all at once.
I don't know. We may have to test that argument because I'm not so sure lately.
Well, we might have to get the fact checkers to check that out. But well, let's talk about your background, because you have a very everybody has a unique background to themselves, but I think that, you're obviously in the motorcycle space with Moto Vixens, like I talked about in the intro, and I definitely want to talk about that, but that's not really where your story began. If you go back in your life and think about when your entrepreneurial spirit started or got a spark, talk about when that was. Was that as a kid, a teenager, a young woman? How did that happen?
I think it was just when I was a kid, when I was wrangling all my cousins together and, just trying to make sure they didn't drive all our parents crazy, and they were my responsibility. So in a sense, I think I was managing people at a very young age.
But you didn't, did you wanted to be a doctor, right? That's what you wanted to go to med school?
Honestly, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I think when you're young, I think you kind of go with what your parents kind of just hint at until it's embedded in you that you want to do it. And so I think, because of the fact I had been going to med school, I was just like, oh yeah, I'm going to med school. I'm going to be a doctor. And that was one of two professions in our culture that was really important. You were either a doctor or a lawyer, and that would honor your family.
So what is your culture? You're not, you're born here in America, but your family's not American, right? So where are you guys from?
I am actually Taiwanese, but it's easier. And I know it drives people crazy, but I always say I'm Chinese. It's just easier than telling somebody I'm Taiwanese and then having to explain the difference. And
well, yeah, because I don't know the difference. One of my best friends, her family's from, his wife is from China. She was born in Vietnam, but they're all Chinese, and they immigrated here to the United States and California. So I don't honestly know the difference between Taiwan and China either. So I can understand that.
China's mainland China, right? And then Taiwan's this island, which was originally called Formosa, the beautiful island. And they're just a republic of China. So because we're all descended from the Chinese culture, I just say Chinese to make it super easy.
And your parents came here, you were born here in the United States, but your parents came here for what reason? Were they looking for entrepreneurial opportunities, or what brought them to America to begin with?
So my father was an engineer, and he would take contracts, oil contracts. So he actually had contracts that he fulfilled in America. So we moved to America to follow him.
Did you move straight to the state of Washington, or was there somewhere else?
Oh gosh, no. My dad actually had contracts from all over the US. So we've basically lived in almost every state. And it wasn't until I think my mom and dad decided to conceive me, we ended up in Los Angeles. So that's where I was born.
Oh, okay. So it sounds like you've probably been on the West Coast pretty much your whole life, right? So maybe
Almost.
there.
Yeah, almost. The majority of it, I should say, I did end up on the West Coast. We lived in Chicago for a great deal of time. We even lived in Jacksonville also. We've lived in Texas. So we've lived everywhere. But if I talk about a big block of my time, yes, California has been a big block of my time.
So your dad was an engineer, worked on oil contracts, got to travel. That's why you guys immigrated into the United States. You were born here. You have siblings too, right? You have other brothers and sisters?
One brother, 18 months older than me. And he's a rigger and a stuntman.
Oh, okay. So a rigger and a stuntman. So let's talk about that. What does a rigger do? Because I'm assuming that has to do something with stunt people.
It does. Well, obviously, he's been in the industry for so long. I mean, what better way than to rig his own gear, right? So, and his own stunts. And I can't really, I don't even think I can discuss the people he has rigged. But I remember when he started rigging, he rigged for Fear Factor. And
I remember that show.
Back when, do you remember?
Yeah, Joe Rogan. Remember, Joe Rogan was the guy that did the show.
Exactly. And I remember him telling me, oh, I'm rigging for Fear Factor. And I'm like, okay. He goes, you want to come and watch? And it was intense. I mean, he went out there and he tested, all the stunts before people did them. And it's a long, arduous job. That's for sure. But He does that. And he does also stunt work because that's what he's been doing forever.
That's really interesting. Well, I guess growing up living in LA, that might be just a kind of a natural opportunity that you might not have living in Topeka, Kansas, or Chicago, Illinois, or Jacksonville.
Not true. Not true. I mean, I think it's pretty luck of the draw. And you know how we always talk about never give up? That just literally around the corner, like a month before or a month shy of you getting an opportunity that will launch you into success, people give up, right? So don't give up. And that's what he did. He didn't give up. And he ended up working for one of the best known stunt coordinators in the film industry.
That's interesting. So you got an older brother, younger brother. So you got a younger brother, and then you thought you wanted to go into the medical field, decided that really wasn't the thing. So what was there something specifically that made you realize I'm not going to do this? Because you did go to med school. You took 4 years of Latin. You did all that stuff to make your mom proud. What changed your mind ultimately at the end of the day?
When she passed away, and I realized the medical field could not give her even the answers that she wanted, that was very difficult for me, because I went into that field thinking that I could make a difference. And that's really hard when you watch your parents, suffer through that, and realizing even when I was going through the paperwork with her and reading the charts with her, I don't even think they knew how to treat her at that point. And she was in tremendous pain. So once I went through that and she passed, I kind of lost my heart for it. There wasn't that drive anymore. And I think that was also when I realized that was really more her dream than mine.
Yeah.
I got a chance to explore that.
Well, I'm sorry about the loss of your mom. I mean, I'm blessed to have both my parents still with me today, and I went through the loss of my father-in-law. My wife's dad passed away, so I know how difficult that is from the spouse's perspective. I can't imagine what it was like for you. But so what's interesting about your story is you went from participating or not participating, pursuing medical career in the anticipation of helping not only your mom but other people, and that kind of let you down. So you went to work in a tech firm, right? So tell me about what that was like and what you were doing at that time.
It was a change of pace for me. I just wanted to get some time off to figure out what I wanted to do, and obviously, figured, okay, let's go work for the high tech firm. I actually met my husband there, and
Okay.
he had, or my now ex-husband, I should say, technically, I actually met my now ex-husband there, and he was transferred. I believe he was being promoted at that time, and so he was transferred to corporate, which is where I worked, and that's how I met him. Got introduced to him, and ended up getting married and having 2 children with him.
So you did. So you worked at the tech firm, ended up helping you start your family because you got your boys out from that relationship.
I don't expect that at all, because I wish you understood, Jason. In high school, I was voted most likely never to get married and have children.
Really?
Yeah.
So how old were you when you got married? Did it take a while for you to kind of find him and get married?
Oh, hang on, Jason. I have so many things to divulge, and this is probably not a good idea, but I'm going to do it anyways because I don't care anymore. He was my 3rd engagement.
Oh, so your high school classmates were right.
Yeah, I think I was a serial engager at that point. A serial fiance.
Wow. So you've broken hearts all your life, huh?
The case. No. I think they disappointed me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So now you did, so you also did some modeling and acting as well. When did that happen in your story?
Oh gosh, I think truthfully, it all kind of melded together. After my mom passed, I think there was part of it like a cast a wide net. And I decided, well, I never had the chance to explore what I wanted to do. So let's do stunt work. Let's do modeling. Let's do acting. Let's work for this high tech firm. Let's see where I end up. Because when you never get a chance to explore, how do you know? And I had a girlfriend at one point that had even said, hey, let's go take motorcycle lessons, right? And go ride motorcycles. And if I think about it now, really what it was I had a bucket list. And I actually started, the first two things on my bucket list were go take an MSF riding course, learn how to ride a motorcycle because it terrified me. And then go take a safety course for guns and shoot guns, of which both I do to this day because I love it.
That's so, and MSF is Motorcycle Safety Foundation, which is a national organization that teaches people how to ride motorcycles. So you started riding motorcycles in your adult life, not as a teenager, right?
No, I wish I had done it as a teenager. There wouldn't be this fear biting, at the back of me all the time, just going, oh, don't do that. You're going to crash. You're going to crash.
Well, you and I are similar in that regard because I didn't actually start riding motorcycles until I was, I think, 30. Now I rode a couple of dirt bikes that my friends had when I was a kid, but I never really rode bikes, especially not on the street. And so at 30, I convinced my wife to let me buy this $400. It was a 1978 Honda Twin Star 185. So it's a tiny little motorcycle, 55-mile-an-hour top speed. And she's like, okay, you can't get hurt on that. But I looked like a gorilla on a moped because I was, he was too small for me.
Oh, I bet you that was great.
But I loved it. And so you too loved it. You got on that motorcycle. You took that
sense of freedom.
Yes.
I don't know what it is. There's an independence. There's a sense of freedom. It is so absolutely visceral, and it's so hard to explain to somebody. And when you're that close to danger all the time, and your senses are heightened, you feel most alive. And there was something about that I could never get out of my system. So I had to be a part of it.
Yeah, for those that are listening who don't ride motorcycles, they'll never understand what we're talking about. But those who do absolutely know it's wind therapy. It's a visceral. I like that word, visceral experience. And you're a lot of people say, well, I couldn't do it because I'm too scared I'd wreck. And yeah, that's part of the experience.
But you put that in your mind, and then you're expecting it to happen. And it's just like anything else in life. If you expect it, you'll manifest it. So why not expect the best and then have this amazing experience from that will change your life?
Yeah. My wife and other close friends of mine who know that I ride they think I'm weird because I wouldn't say like or desire, but I don't mind watching motorcycle accident videos on YouTube or whatever, because as I watch those, it reminds me, of what not to do. I was watching one just recently, and it was actually a video of a Lamborghini or something on some crazy road, and the Lamborghini was pulled off to the side, and the guy videoing it from behind was showing the Lamborghini was about to pull out and do a U-turn and head back. And so he stomped on the gas, was doing the burnout and turned. Well, when he turned left to come, because he was on the right shoulder, when he turned left, as soon as he crossed the yellow line, a motorcycle just from the left corner of the screen goes, whoa, just right past, because the Lamborghini didn't look to see if anybody was coming. And he didn't hit. There was no accident, but the motorcyclist stopped, pulled over, and came out, and they had lots of words. And to his credit, the Lamborghini driver got out, and you could tell he was very apologetic, but it could have killed that person just by not paying attention. So I enjoy watching that only to keep myself centered, because you have to ride like you're invisible, like nobody can see you, right? That's what you guys probably teach on your track days and teaching
all the time. Well, the track days are different. You're not on a road. You don't have the same obstacles that you have to face, like, people in cars that are on their phone, people in their cars distracted by their kids, whatever. We have so many more things to worry about on the road than we do at the track. At the track, you only have to worry about the idiot that's going to pass you. And usually you can hear them. So where they're going to be. But on the street, the hazards are everywhere. So you have to ride like you're invisible. And I always teach people, look at tires. People's tires will tell you a lot about where they're going. And I have saved myself many a time when I see somebody's tire, because what it looks like they're doing isn't what they're doing. The truth is what you see in the tire.
Yeah. It's where the rubber meets the road, literally.
Yes, yes. So I always tell people when you're next to drivers, behind drivers, kind of like kitty corner from them, diagonally look, because they don't see you.
Yeah, they don't. And I that's a good tip. And I also, when I'm talking to people about riding bikes, is that if I'm coming up on a car who is about to pull out, into traffic at a perpendicular to the road at a crossroads or whatever, I'm looking at their wheels to see, are the wheels moving? Are they turning? Because if they haven't completely stopped and they're still turning, you got to cover the gas or cover the brake, let off the gas. You got to get the clutch pulled in, make sure that you're prepared to evade. So now you learned to ride motorcycles on that Motorcycle Safety Foundation course, and you absolutely fell in love with it, so much so that you decided to start your own business, Moto Vixens, around that concept. So talk about how that idea originated, and then how you absolutely manifested Moto Vixens.
Because I'm cheeky. I can't help it. I think that's the sarcastic part of me that, if you get to know me, I'm pretty flippant and sarcastic quite a bit. But I named it Moto Vixens to be cheeky. And I didn't realize that when I was naming it, it was going to pigeonhole me into like a women day. And so it actually worked against me for the first 2 years. Men thought that it was only a solely woman's day. And it wasn't until later that, word, kind of came about like, oh, no. She does it it's co-ed, men, women, young adults, everybody can come. Now it's kind of become almost fashionable because people are in this women's movement. So in a sense, I guess I came well before my time. If I just launched it, a few years later, maybe it would have been less specific towards women and more inclusive. The reason I did it was to make it inclusive, because most of our track organizations are very masculine and male driven. And there isn't much, it isn't easy for a woman to get into it, because there's so many men that give you advice and it's bad advice, by the way. And they want to act like your friend. We wanted to make it so these women could come into the space and be supported. And you wouldn't get advice. You wouldn't be getting, oh, you should do this, you should do that. We would give suggestions and say, go talk to a mechanic and see what works for you, because women fit motorcycles differently. We're lighter. Some of us, me, shorter, right? My reach to the bars is different than a male. A male's reach tends to be longer. My hands are small, so levers have to be changed. I mean, I have all kinds of things that I have to adjust to make that bike safe for me to ride.
Well, you've obviously done more than just come up with a cheeky name. You actually started a legit business that's making a huge impact in the industry. So when did you decide that you wanted to do the business Moto Vixens to begin with? What was the genesis of that idea?
The genesis was basically to create a website that was a resource for women. And at that time, it was just, I had a hard time finding gear, finding, the aftermarket parts and pieces to customize that bike to me. I had a hard time finding mechanics and shops and people that would specialize in that. So it started as a resource. And then from that resource, so much more came of it. Obviously, I started a track organization.
So you started Moto Vixens in 2012. So you're coming up on your 10-year anniversary this year. So congratulations. Most businesses don't last that long, but you figured out how to succeed in spite of the odds. So way to go.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's been a long, arduous journey.
Yeah. So you started in 2012 and you started doing track days. You collaborated with Ducati of Bellevue to host track days in 2013 for women riders. And that was like, hey, everybody loved this. And so you want to go on and begin bigger. You started doing your own track days, in 2014? Is that right?
I did. So what I had done up to that point was I was supporting other track works and kind of being the female face for, as an instructor for those particular track organizations. it's interesting in hardship that you kind of ideas come up. So what ended up happening was those organizations that I was working for, I was trying to get them to do women's days or a women's session, and they were not interested. Their comment to me was, there's not enough women for it to make it worth my while, right? And what they missed was in bringing more women in, women are just, they're social creatures. We bring more people in, and they just didn't believe in my vision. And when I started doing my one-off days, and this is when I was still working for them, I hired, one of those groups to run it for me so that I could focus on the women that I was bringing to the event. That happened for about a year. And then the guys said I had an agenda and fired me from both of those organizations as an instructor.
What?
Yes. So when they fired me, I think it was their attempt to get rid of me altogether, right?
Huh.
And obviously they don't know me very well, because my option was I never ride again at the track, or I start my organization, like legitly work my butt off and do my own days and compete against them. So in getting rid of me, they created their own competition.
Wow. So that's an interesting part of the story. So you started Moto Vixens as a resource, not as a training or rider days or track days or anything like that. Nope. And you were showing up being the Moto Vixen to help women get to these events. Yes. And you get fired because you have an agenda. I can't imagine what agenda you would have that they wouldn't want you to be participating. But nevertheless, that's when you started to do your own track days. And you actually pulled in some pretty heavy hitters with you when you started doing that too. So Jason Pridmore of JP43 Training, you got him to be involved. How did you get that relationship started? Did you meet him at a track day? How did that work?
No, at the time I was dating somebody who was my boyfriend who knew him, and he reached out to him. I ended up getting on the phone with him, talking to him. And then Caroline Olsen was there, and she's a Norwegian racer. And at that time she was, racing in the top 10 with the boys in Moto America. So he was convincing me, you should totally sponsor Caroline. She's a woman racer. She's legit, blah, blah, blah. And so that's how we actually ended up starting our relationship to doing the training together. And Caroline would come and actually help coach everybody too.
Wow. So so again, the relationships with people, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, kind of helped spur this thing on. So what's the big projects you're working on right now? Of course, it's wintertime now when we're recording this, so there's not a lot going on in the motorcycle world, but what's kind of the next big project for 2022 that Moto Vixens is working on?
It's funny. Everybody thinks that just because we're not at the racetrack, we're not working, but I am always working. In fact, I'm busier in the off season than I am on season, because at least on season, I'm focused on the events. Off season, I'm focused on sponsorship for next year, setting up the track days for the track events for the upcoming year. Everything gets planned in that kind of 4 or 5 month period. And a lot of things change. As you and I both know, things change at a heartbeat. And what you were counting on is no longer something you could count on. So you make a shift, right? You pivot. And so that's what we're doing now. And I'm in the process of, writing a book, of which hopefully we're talking about having it released early this upcoming year. Wow,
that's great. Well, congratulations. I know that's a big project for sure. Can you give us a little insight into the topics or contents of the book, or is that too early to talk about?
It's based on my experience as a female in this industry, and the challenges I faced and how I overcame them.
Well, I will buy your book. I want to read more of this story, even though I'm getting a front row seat. We're talking one-on-one about this. I think that would be very interesting to hear the whole story. So let me, if I may, I want to kind of tell you a little bit about why I do this show. My listeners are familiar with these series of questions I'm about to ask you, but I've studied casually and formally the idea and the concept of success by talking to people just like you for the last 5 or 6 years. So it started with me experiencing my own success as an entrepreneur and wondering, well, how did this happen? Like I was an unemployed school teacher when I started my, one of my companies.
Oh my God, I would never have, not even have expected that. That's
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So I became successful in the ways that I wanted to be known as being successful, and other people recognized it, and nationally, et cetera. So then I started asking other people. I would sit down with people just like you and say, well, how did you do it? What did you do? Tell me about your story. And what I discovered, Carol, throughout all those conversations is that there were these 5 things that kept popping up over and over and over again that were similar in everybody's stories. Now, everybody has different perspectives, of course, and the way they saw their keys to success or how they succeed is a little different. But because those 5 things showed up every single time, that's why I started, when I decided I want to do a podcast, I wanted to start a podcast based on this concept. And so now that's what I do. I kind of talk to people just like you, talk about your story, and then I'm going to see if my theory holds true with you. So I'm going to start with this question, then we'll get into
I feel like I'm
No, I've been making notes as you've been talking. This is all going to be good. So how do you define, like, just in your mind, Carol Carpenter, the Moto Vixen, how do you define the word success?
It's funny. I think if you had asked me at different points in my life, that answer would have been different. But right now, for me, it's who I've made an impact with, and the amount of people I've made an impact with, and who I've touched and helped them succeed. That to me is success, because in a way, success. And I'm going to share a story with you because it actually touched me. When we were looking for girls for our race team, there was no shortage of girls that wanted to sign up to be a part of it. However, I wasn't looking for just really good racers. I was looking for really good, amazing individuals, and there's a difference. And when I picked these 2 girls, one girl she just absolutely started bawling and said, I don't understand why I was chosen. And I said, because I see something in you that I don't see in any of the other girls. And this year, I think it was summer, she sent me a mug, and I wish I had kept a snapshot of it, of what she had said. But basically it was to thank me for believing in her and watching her, slowly improve and succeed. And that to me is what I view success as.
So with that as a definition, do you consider yourself to be a successful person?
Oh, yes. Yeah, now I do. It's so different than the way I saw it before, because I never thought I would be successful, and I treated that whole word success differently.
Well, I think what's interesting, to go back to your story from earlier, is that you were talking about in your culture, the Chinese or Taiwanese culture, is like you had 2 options for careers, a lawyer or a doctor, right? Because so ingrained in that culture is that success is being that specialist on a highly qualified, highly skilled route. And you attempted to go that way to please your parents, please your mom, make your mom happy. But ultimately, you did something completely different in the entrepreneurial world, which is quite a bit different than what your parents probably expected as a successful daughter, what a successful daughter would do. But you have become.
Thank God my mother passed away, because she would have killed me.
You're riding motorcycles? What are you doing?
Oh my God.
Well, but you have become successful, and in your terms, right? How much impact you want to make. And here's what's interesting, Carol, is that the definition of success in the dictionary says if you have achieved the thing that you intended to achieve, that you wanted to achieve when you began, that's success. So if I want to lose 5 pounds, I lose 5 pounds, I'm a successful person. If I want to make $1 million a year, I make $1 million a year, I'm a successful person. And so it's really subjective. So that's why I start this line of questioning with, well, how do you define it? And do you think you're successful? And I love your answer. And I love the confidence with which you answer the question. Yes, I am a successful person, because it's changed so much. So let me dive in, and feel free to disagree. I do occasionally have guests say, nope, that's not what my keys of success were. But the first key that I found out of the 5, that probably the most important, but it's not the only key that unlocks the door to success, but it's the first and most important, is that of passion. And when I say that, most people think that I'm talking about emotional passion. I just love it. Now, you love motorcycles. I love motorcycles. I'm passionate about motorcycles. It sounds like you're passionate about motorcycles, but that's not necessarily the key to success, is just being passionate about the thing emotionally. What it really means, and I'm big on definitions, but the word passion actually comes from a root word in Latin. You probably know this better than I do. You took 4 years. That means willing to endure. I did take a year of Latin in high school. It doesn't mean willing to endure. And once you understand that that's what passion is, that now, okay, yes, successful entrepreneurs had that passion, the willingness to endure, to push through the hard times in order to make something amazing happen on the back end. So with that as my explanation of my theory is the first key. Do you agree? And if so, how did that play a part in your road to success?
If I wasn't passionate about what I did and the obstacles that I had to overcome, do you think I'd be here today, 10 years later, to basically stick a middle finger up at everybody that didn't believe in me? Right.
Yeah. So you've endured being fired, being ridiculed. You've endured the
And had my social media shut down.
Really?
Oh yeah, there was.
Oh, you got to tell that story. Tell that one.
Oh, Jason, I wish I could tell you the lengths that people went to bring me down. And when I say I was close to having a nervous breakdown, this is exactly why, if you do not have passion for something and can endure it, because you are going to have to overcome obstacles you never thought you would have to overcome. You know, if you can, and you truly do have that passion to endure, you can get through anything. Absolutely anything. Now, you may be a bit frayed on the other side, but you can get through it. And if anything, you have great stories to tell. And yes, so what ended up happening was, gosh, I'm divulging so much to you today. My industry is going to hate me after this. I just know it. When they fired me and they didn't give me an option, right, to do anything but either leave the industry or really just become their competition, the people that I chose for my staff were told from my competitors now that if they worked for me, they were no longer going to be able to work for them. Now, this is a very small pool of people that we have, and the same writers kind of make their way around, and that's the way it's always been. But now they were trying to make it exclusive. If you ride for us, you cannot ride for anybody else. If we catch you, whether you choose to pay for a day and take one of her days, or you end up in a picture at one of her days, you will be let go. So if I could explain why that's so bad, there's, like I said, not a huge pool of people. So that frightened a lot of my staff from not coming back and went to go work with them exclusively. What's interesting about it is when you make it, exclusive like that, eventually they start to feel caged and they don't want to remain. And that's when a lot of them started coming back to me. It took years, but I always said, I left my door open. I was not about being, oh, if you work for them, you can't work for me. I'm like, nope. You can work for whoever you want. I've always told you guys that. I just ask that whatever we teach here and the philosophies we teach here, stay here.
Yeah. Well, that's, it's hard to believe that still happens in this day and age. I know that was a while back, but it's still hard to believe that type of stuff happens. I can't imagine what the motivation would be, but congratulations on pushing past that and enduring and being passionate to lead you to the place where you are today, because you're making a huge impact, which is what you want to do. So good on you. Well, let me ask. So the second key, I want to ask you about that is being at the right place at the right time. And so you got passion. And by the way, they all start with P. It's easy to remember: place, passion, and place. So being at the right place at the right time. you told in your story, as we were talking earlier, about when you decided to leave the pursuit of the medical field. You wanted to try everything. You did the tech firm, the acting, the stunt woman stuff, and ultimately riding motorcycles. So it sounds to me, and I want you to tell me if this is right or not, but it sounds to me like you put yourself in so many different places that when the right place was the right place at the right time, you were there. So it wasn't dumb luck. You just didn't wake up one morning and happened upon the ability to build this amazing motorcycle based brand. You put yourself in all these places. How do you see the right place at the right time playing into your success story?
I think I'm going to tell you another story. God, I'm going to be so full of them today. So when I started this, I wasn't in the right place at the right time because it was still very male dominated. The male view took precedent to everything else. I think I probably did come into it a couple of years earlier, but it did put me in the right position. So when people became very accepting of women in the sport, and they actually started saying, because I had a big freaking mouth when I came in, and I said, women are the future of the sport. And literally men laughed me off like the stage, laughed at me like I was a joke. And then 2 years later, we were sitting in a writers meeting, and Dave Alexander, who is one of the premier mechanics for national racing, like Motor America. He's had some top level racers and been their crew chief. He sat up and said, women are the future of the sport. And I was sitting in the back of the room and I said, hey, fucking men. Finally, somebody said it. So yes, it was just I think I was there just a couple of years earlier, but yes, it positioned me to be in the right place.
Yeah, but if you listen, Carol, if you had waited until it became the right place and the right time, you would have missed the opportunity.
I would have missed it. You're right.
See, and that's the thing. So many entrepreneurs who listen to this show and are trying to figure out how to hack success for themselves are just looking for that opportune moment. I got to be here at the right place, right time. Sometimes it's putting yourself in these places. You don't know what's going on. So get out of your office, get out of your living room, get out of your mom's basement, go do something. You don't know when the right place at the right time. And success is on the other side of that. So you've got passion has been a huge part. Right place, right time. Although you arrived early to the show, you got right place, right time. Here's the third one. This is funny. So for those that are watching this on YouTube, you'll see this. And Carol, you've never seen me do this before, but I also have this way because I'm an old school teacher, right? So I help people remember using mnemonic devices, which are ways that you can trick your memory. For instance, righty tighty, lefty loosey. That's a mnemonic device just to help you remember things, right? So I use my fingers to help remember the 5 keys. And so passion is on the thumb, so it's like a thumbs up, and that helps you remember. Okay, yeah, passion. And then right place, right time is your pointer finger because you're pointing at a place or time. And then the third key is people, and we put that on the middle finger.
That's perfect. That's how I feel about most people these days.
Yeah. So you were talking about use the term middle finger earlier, but now I don't mean it in a negative capacity, although it can be. But there's usually in people's stories of success like yours that you can point to a person or persons who, had they not been there, you wouldn't be the success you are today. Now, before I give you the opportunity to respond, I'm going to say this. They could be the negative person, like the person who fired you could be that person who made you successful because he fired you. Or it could be a person who lifted you up and was an aid to you. So it could be positive or negative. So is there a person or persons in your story to success?
There are several people.
Yeah, feel free to name them if you want. I'm not saying you have to call them out, but if you want to, you can.
I don't know if I can. There was actually, they're now my advisors. And when they found me, I was not in a good place. I had been beaten down. And like I said, at that time too, they had pulled my social media. And if anybody ever tries to get their social media back or out of jail, it is close to impossible. And I did my business through social media. So I discussed the dates, the times, the gates, the forms that the barcodes would get put on there so they could fill out their forms before they got there. Everything was on social media, and it crippled me. And so at that point, I think I had had enough. And there were several people, but the two that were my business advisors, I remember them being my light because I was really in the dark back then. And if I get emotional, I'm sorry. But they came in when I was ready to quit. And remember, we talked about there is that one moment where you can quit or you can decide to, continue on. And they came in and they reminded me, do you think you'd be struggling right now if nobody knew about you? And I said, no. And they said, so consider yourself in a position of not obscurity, but resistance. And they are resisting you like crazy. And just wait. You'll hit acceptance and you'll get some wind in your sails. But for now, they wouldn't be fighting you if you weren't a threat. And that changed the way I looked at everything.
Wow. That's a great story. I love hearing stories like that. That's why I love doing the show, because it's not only I love hearing it. I know that listeners right now love hearing that just to that honesty and transparency. And I'm glad that you had the advisors you did to show you how to move through obscurity and resistance into acceptance. And that's where success is, right? That's where impact happens, is at the end of that journey.
And I think what people don't realize is these hardships, you do need to go through these hardships because there's so much more. And they're literally like stacking steps. And that's the reason why you succeed, because without one of these steps, you just haven't built that solid foundation to get there.
Well, the last two,
Endurance.
go ahead.
Sorry.
So the last two keys to success that I discovered were kind of bonus keys. So those first three of passion, place, and people were easy for me to identify in most people's stories. And I think that if you just casually looked at any of the top entrepreneurs in the world right now, you could probably say, yeah, here's where that happened. But the last two keys were kind of bonus that I discovered. I had to look a little bit deeper. And I'm going to do these two together. I'm going to explain what they mean and then give you the opportunity to respond. And so the fourth key is preparation. In other words, what I mean by that is, do you have the know-how to pull off the thing that you're going to do in order to be successful? So, for example, did you have the understanding of motorcycling and track days and in order to make it happen? And it sounds like you did, because you went through the hard knocks of learning that at that point, which made you successful in the back end. The failures taught you. And then the final P is plan. And what was your plan to make this all happen? What financial resources did you have available that you could deploy so that you could actually succeed and build a business that creates revenue and profit and impact? So in terms of preparation and plan, how did Carol deal with both of those in her story to success?
Preparation was just like you said, school of, hard knocks. Just learn knowledge as much as you can about everything surrounding that business. And I also had the opportunity to bring in my touch to everything too, because their business plan for doing a track day was very different than what I saw it to be. I wanted it to be more, and I made it more. It's kind of a little bit like having a party. Like we have sponsors that give out swag and give out certificates, and we even have tire vendors that give out free tires. We basically raffle off free tires for the day. So that's what I wanted, to make it special. And I get to do that because I couldn't do that if I had worked for somebody. So yes, that was getting to do it with my spin on it. Right. And then for planning, you know what we say about planning. Yeah, well, never goes as planned, and you just kind of got to adapt. And
that's right.
I've gotten really good at adapting.
Our ability to adapt will always outperform our ability to plan, right?
Without a doubt. So I plan, but I also know my plans can go up in smoke because I used to live and die by my plans. And if you try to force things to happen, it never works out anyways. So the best thing to do is plan, have a main focus goal, and then get as close as you can, or at least, if you can get there even using a different route, get there using a different route. It just adapt to it, because you're along for the ride.
Yeah. So
Really.
speaking of being along for the ride, what is your all-time favorite motorcycle? I'm gonna put you on the spot.
I know, because my vendors, all my manufacturers will hate me for this.
Oh, well, then I don't want to put you, I don't get you in trouble.
No, it's okay, because and I'll explain why, because it has a very sentimental reason for me. My most favorite is the one I own that sits in my garage that I call my baby. It's my Ducati 848 EVO. And the reason being was that was the bike that I bought myself when I reached a certain point. And I swore that until I reached a certain point of competency to ride a motorcycle, would I get that bike. And it was the last year they made that version and that body style. And I loved it so much that it was like, okay, I'm working my butt off, and I'm getting that bike. And I did.
Congratulations on that. That's great. I've never ridden a Ducati. I've only ridden a couple of sport bikes ever. Ducati has a beautiful sound. I love the Ducati sound. So I'm going to need to come to Washington and get on a track day with you and your crew, because I would love to do that. That sounds like so much fun.
Ducatis are a little bit like art on wheels, and everything on that Ducati, it wears a certain way, so it only adds to its allure. It's beautiful.
That's great. Well, I want to turn this back to you to give some advice to some listeners. So on our show, we have listeners that span the entire gamut of the entrepreneurial experience. We've got some that are killing it, and they're right now sipping a drink on a beach somewhere with not a care in the world. No, don't need to do anything, never have to work again. They built great businesses that are providing cash flow permanently. And then we got guys and girls on the other end of the spectrum who are just now getting started or haven't even taken that first step. And then, of course, a lot of us right in the middle of that. So I want you to talk to the first, or to the latter, right? The person who hasn't gotten started or just now getting started. As a very successful entrepreneur who's built an amazing brand in Moto Vixens, what would your advice be to that person who is right on that beginning cusp of the entrepreneurial journey? What would you say, do this in order to succeed, or this is what you need to do? What's your advice?
Follow your intuition. I got nothing to say. There's something about the universe providing when you need it. And when you ask that question, what should I do? Because if I hadn't asked that question, I wouldn't have cast the wide net.
That's good. Follow your intuition. I love that. My editors take those pieces that we ask at the end, and they take those and put those out there, because those little nuggets, that's such a great piece of wisdom from you as a successful female entrepreneur. And then everybody else gives great different pieces of advice. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for being on the show. And let me ask you, if people are impressed by you, and they will be, and they want to get in touch with you, what would you say? Hey, this is the best way to get in touch.
My media page, Carol Carpenter Media, has my contact information at the bottom, so they can contact me there.
All right, so it's Carol Carpenter, Carol, and then Carpenter spelled the right, the normal way. Media, media.com.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then Moto Vixens, you can follow Moto Vixens on social media, I'm sure, and that's MOTOVIXENS, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Carol, it has been such a pleasure to talk to you. And I do look forward to eventually meeting you in person, hopefully at a track day. I'd love to come ride. I know we talked.
Always welcome.
Well, I would love to do it. And maybe we could do a show from the road, like a check-in at some point. That'd be great, wouldn't it?
Hey, I have a show too. Come and join our show.
Well, tell everybody about your show. That'll be your final opportunity to promote you, Carol. So what's your show? Tell everybody about it.
We have a reality show we're just filming, and we're going to be shopping it out as well. I think this is part of our strategy and the things that we're doing. We've got podcasts, we've got a book coming out, we've got a TED Talk, which I know you're also doing
yes.
on April 30th, and this reality show. So it all is going to encompass all the things we do and the crazy things we do.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the TEDx because this show will air before that. So if you are interested in meeting Carol and or me, probably more her than me, we will both be speaking at TEDx Wilmington in Delaware at the end of April 2022. We'd love to have you in the audience. You get to meet both of us. We'd love for you to be there. It's an honor to have been invited to be a part of that. So Carol, I'm looking forward to it. If we don't meet before then, for sure, we're going to get together in Wilmington, Delaware at the TEDx conference in April. So Carol, been a pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this. Good luck to everything you got going on in 2022. And maybe I'll be riding with you before too long.
Sounds perfect. Thank you,
All right.
Jason.
Well, there you have it. Another amazing success story from a very successful entrepreneur in Carol Carpenter. What a pleasure. What a pleasure talking to her and getting to know her. And what's interesting about this world, when you network with the right people, you end up finding some pretty amazing people like Carol. So we were connected through an organization. We kind of knew of each other, but didn't really know. And people kept saying, you've got to get Carol on your show. She's got an amazing story. And you just heard it. Her story is amazing of passion, of pushing through, getting fired and shunned and looked down upon as a female infiltrating a male dominated industry. And now she's experienced success in spite of all of that because of her willingness to endure and her passion. We talked about her being at the right place at the right time and actually arriving a little early. And then having the right people in her life, both positive and negative, in her preparation or plan. Those 5 keys show up every single time. And if you're a regular listener to the show, you know that shows up in everyone's story. And what's interesting about this is that once you become successful, then you sometimes get trapped by it. We didn't really get into that with Carol's story, but I know that story resonates with a lot of listeners today because it was my story. I got trapped by the success of my business I started as an entrepreneur. But when I learned how to exit daily operations and still maintain ownership of that company, that's when my life changed. That's when I was able to start a podcast. That's when I was able to start other companies and buy other companies. That's the lifestyle I wanted to live. I call it the exit lifestyle. Get to travel, get to do things. And you want to do that too. So I want to invite you as you kick off this new year in 2022 to take my Exit Accelerator group coaching course. This is a live coaching program that I do with people just like you. I take only 12 entrepreneurs at a time, and we go through a 12-week series of lessons on the things I did to exit a business without selling it to a third party, to exit without exiting, as I call it. It's the Exit Accelerator, and you can go to exitwithoutexiting.com to learn more about it and to sign up for the next cohort. We've got one starting, I think, just 2 weeks from now when this episode is being released. So make sure that you get in this Exit Accelerator, learn what this takes to get out of the weeds of daily operations of your business so that you can live the exit lifestyle. Because maybe you want to go start a motorcycle company. Maybe you want to ride a motorcycle across the country. Maybe you want to travel more with your family or start a nonprofit or go on mission trips. Whatever it is you want to do, it is available for you to do. It just takes a few steps of getting your business arranged in such a way that it doesn't require your daily operational oversight. I can show you how to do that because that's what I did. Go to exitwithoutexiting.com to learn more. Well, tune in again next time when we talk with yet another amazingly successful entrepreneur about his or her journey to success. We'll talk about the 5 keys of success and everything about their story. So make sure you tune in next time. Until then, remember, I am the real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we invite you to visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Take charge of your business. Grow it from great to incredible. Join us again next time here on The Root of All Success.